So apparently the mindset in the Sabres front office is, why have one seventh defender when you can have two seventh defenders? Hello everyone, Chris here from Ripdog Sports, and today we're continuing our 23-player in 23-day countdown to the Sabres preseason opener against Columbus. But today, a bit of a change in script because we're going to 24 players in this countdown, because today's video we have to talk about two players in Jacob Bryson and Zachary Jones, two defensemen who are basically the same player. Now that might be a little unfair to both of them, but they're both slotted for the same role, they both profile the same way, they both are undersized. There's a lot of things here that are simply the same, and I think it's going to be very tough to separate them to decide who's going to be the seventh defenseman, or we may be looking at a case where the Sabres keep both and carry 8 defensemen into the season. Later on, I want to get into how kind of mystifying this whole situation is, and I think that'll become more apparent as we discuss the two players. So let's get into it. We're going to start with Jacob Bryson. Bryson is the known commodity for Sabres fans. He's 27 years old. He was drafted in 2017, 99th overall, so that's the 4th round. And he made his NHL debut in 2020. And then, after his rookie contract ended, he was able to get a nice second contract of $3.7 million over 2 years. And then last year, he was re-signed on a 1-year, $900,000 deal, and then he was re-signed to the same deal after the conclusion of last season. Basically, Bryson has been, he's a 4th round pick, so you're not going to say he was disappointing, but I think given the value of his second contract, he's been a bit disappointing. He's played 254 games over his career, and in that time he's posted 43 points, 4 goals, 39 assists. He has a plus-minus of -38, but we're not going to judge too harshly on the plus-minus because on a bad team you're going to accumulate plus-minus, and it's kind of an unfair statistic. Some of the worst defenders I've ever seen on the eye test had some of the highest plus-minuses in my experience of watching hockey, so I don't really hold the plus-minus in too high of esteem when it comes to evaluating players. Certainly if it's a guy with a bad plus-minus on a good team, you can start to take some concern from that, but a bad plus-minus on a bad team, that's typical. Last year, he was not good. It was probably his worst professional season. The advanced statistics, and I don't know if you put much stock in the Corsi and the Fenwick stuff, but if you look at those numbers, it was clearly far and away his worst season, and in comparison to other players on the team, he was one of the worst. He played in 48 games a year ago, had 7 assists, no goals, and was -9. And again, the advanced stats show he was quite bad. He's always going to deal with a couple of things, and the number one thing he has to deal with in his career, does Bryson, is his size. He's very small. He's only 5'9", at least that's what he's listed as. So it's difficult physically for him to stand up to a lot of the larger forwards in the league. Certainly if he has to go into the boards, he's going to get beaten, and he's not able to block a lot of shots simply because he's not very big and can't take up a lot of space. His strength is always supposed to be his skating and puck-moving ability, but he hasn't really shown that much offensive work or offensive talent, and because of injuries, he's been very limited over the years. And he hasn't really shown he can be much more than a 7th D-man, and even at that, not a great 7th D-man, because when he's in there, he doesn't really add anything. He can kind of be considered to be invisible. He's a fine choice as a depth piece, perhaps, but he's definitely, I would say, trending downwards, and he's 27. He's not on the back end yet, but this should be the prime of his career. He's entering the prime of his career, but he's also just had the worst season of his career, so those two things don't really track together. He is someone that the Sabres coaching staff seems to appreciate and seems to like. He's inoffensive in a lot of ways, but the Sabres fan base is pretty tired of him if you collect the general opinion, and would prefer to see somebody else in that 7th D-man role. But then the Sabres re-signed him, so clearly the Sabres have intention of giving him another go, right? Well, not so fast, because they went out and they signed Zach Jones. Zach Jones, a 24-year-old drafted 68th overall by the New York Rangers in the 2019 NHL draft. He made his debut almost right away in 2020, And he also got a second contract, but a bit smaller, $1.63 million, which he just ended in New York. Now, in comparison to Bryson, who's coming off the worst season of his career, Zach Jones, in terms of the advanced metrics, is coming off the best season of his career. Jones has played a lot less than Bryson. He's played 115 games in his career, and he's scored 4 goals, has 24 assists, and 28 overall points, and a career plus-minus of -10. Now, that is a -10 on a team that is a fair bit better than the Sabres, but Jones has been trending upward in his career, and he seems to be developing a bit more of an offensive nose for a defenseman. He also has a size issue. He's 5'11", 190, but he's bigger than Bryson, and by NHL standards, even though he's undersized, he's a bit sturdier. He profiles the same way. He's a fast skating, good skating, left-handed, puck-moving defenseman, so they basically have the same function, or they profile the same way. But I will say that in terms of fan base reception and the way players are looked at, Rangers fans really like Zach Jones. They were upset when he left. They really cheered for him and they enjoyed watching him. Maybe he was not the best defenseman, but he is more impactful. There was a preseason game, not that you put much stock in preseason. There was a preseason game last year against the Islanders where he scored 2 goals, one on a breakaway. So, I mean, I don't know if you want your 7th D-man just breaking out on a breakaway, but he has an offensive nose and he wants to make more of an impact on the game. This is a young defenseman, he's only 24, as I said, who I believe is trending upwards, and who I think you would want to give that role to see if he can parlay it into something bigger, maybe with increased responsibility. But that depends heavily on the Sabres coaching staff, which values defense over offense, and the Sabres front office, which might be more comfortable sticking with a guy who they know about, a known quantity, if you will, a guy who's been with the team for a long time in Bryson. But what I honestly think is going to happen, they both have similar skill set, size, and general abilities. I think the Sabres maybe carry 8 defensemen into the season. Given that there's so much D in the organization already, and the fact that there simply are not that many good forwards in the organization, and there's really only 13 forwards who you can see maybe on the roster. I think the 23-man roster may very well be 13 forwards, 8 defensemen, and the 2 goaltenders. But if they end up carrying 7, I think it should be Jones, because I think Jones has much more upside than Bryson, but I have a feeling the Sabres would probably want to carry Bryson simply because he's a known quantity, and the coaching staff is probably more comfortable with his play. So unless Jones can have a major impact and is just far and away clearly the better defenseman in camp and in the preseason, then I would say they're either going to carry 8 defensemen or they're going to go with Bryson. And I think that actually is a mistake. I would prefer to see Jones in that role. I think we've seen enough from Bryson. Again, 27, coming off the worst year of his career. He's generally been underwhelming in his career. But it's the Sabres front office. The Sabres front office is very conservative and kind of slow to make changes, and they're very happy to just go at pace, whatever their pace may be. So I don't think they're going to be in the mood to make any big or large-scale changes. But I do think there is potential that we will see Zach Jones in a defensive role, be it as the 7th defenseman, before the year is out. And personally, I hope so, because he maybe is not the best defenseman in the world, but I think he has more room to develop, and I think he has a lot of potential to be an exciting player. Like, I think he could eventually slot in as a top 6 defenseman, or just in the regular lineup. Whereas I don't see Bryson ever cracking and being a regular top 6 defenseman on a team. I think the Sabres are kind of choosing between the same player here, but I think you would have to ideally choose the guy with more upside, which is Zach Jones. But this is going to lead me into a bit of a segue here about what were they thinking? And I think as Sabres fans, we ask that question a lot. What were they thinking? So if you're going to re-sign Bryson to the 1-year, $900,000 contract, that's great. Okay, you say, all right, you didn't do very good, but we're going to run it back. We're going to give you a chance next year as the 7th defenseman. You know, that's disappointing in and of itself because you'd like for them to upgrade. But it's understandable given that this is the Sabres. And then, though, to go out and sign Jones, it's like, okay, why did you do that? Because you now have Bryson and now you have Jones, so now you have the same defenseman basically just copied, and now you have 8 defensemen. And are they going to compete? Was the idea to bring in competition? Because if it was just to bring in competition, you did sign them both to the same contract. So it almost seems like the intention may be to just have competition and keep one. But in that case, you maybe just, wasted a contract. Or is the intention to keep both and establish a bit of depth? If you did that, you have, again, essentially the same player. So your depth quality didn't increase. The only thing you increased was your depth quantity. If you were really trying to make a change, then you let Bryson go and you bring in Jones and you upgrade the position. You upgrade the 7th defenseman position. If you keep both, you haven't really upgraded it. You've just added more players, which doesn't do anything, especially at the low end of the roster. And you might say, oh, well, they're filling in the roster. They're adding bodies for depth. Bodies are not depth. Bodies are bodies. Good players are depth. But the Sabres seem to have an allergy when it comes to bringing in quality depth players because they're too focused on what they want their profile to be on or on their style of play. They're willing to accept worse players if they play the system that they want to play. But at some point, the quality of player has to increase. It doesn't matter what system you play if your players aren't that good, and that's the bottom line. Look, last night in college football, right? You had UNC, Bill Belichick's debut at North Carolina, and I know everyone's sick of hearing about this, but they played TCU. TCU, a very talented college football team, lots of depth, lots of good players. North Carolina brought in 70 new recruits, right? Lots of new players, but the quality of play is not high enough to compete. It doesn't matter if you have a good coach. It doesn't matter if you have the correct schemes in place. If the quality of your players are bad, your play is going to be bad. And it's not to say the Sabres don't have good players. They do have some good players, but the depth is lacking. And unless they are going to be prepared to spend money to increase that depth, then the team's going to continue to be bad. And that is the frustration all the Sabres fans have, is that the front office does nothing to make the bottom of this roster more competitive. And you can see this here with this whole Bryson Jones debate. If Jones is the 7th D-man, that's great. It's actually an upgrade, but it's not enough of an upgrade to matter. And you could say, well, you don't want to spend a lot of money on a 7th. Why not? If you have money to spend and you're under and you can get under the cap, have a good 7th D-man. Have a guy who could be a starter on other teams and then rotate. Do a rotation between your 6th and 7th D-man. Don't do a rotation between your 7th and 8th D-man. That doesn't make any sense. Have a guy who could be in the starting lineup. Don't have 2 fringe guys. So that's my frustration, and I think that's the frustration all the Sabres fans have with this particular situation. Jones might be a great guy. Rangers fans love him, but Rangers fans are also prepared to admit, yeah, maybe he's not as good as we thought he was. We just kind of like him. Sabres fans are done with Bryson. They're tired of him. It's not all Bryson's fault. Again, he's had a lot of injuries, and he's undersized, but he shouldn't be in this position if he's not, if he's not size appropriate for the NHL. He shouldn't be in the NHL. Lots of good players who were very talented and were great in the minors should not have never really had a chance to shine or were never able to shine in the NHL. I think of 2 who were Hershey Bears. Chris Bourque, who had numerous chances with the Capitals and with the Penguins. He was just too small. That's one of Ray Bourque's sons, right? He was very talented, good offensive player, but he was too small. He had a great career at Hershey. They retired his number. Another one, Keith Aucoin, who was an assist guru in Hershey. He got some time with the Islanders at the tail end of his career. Both really good players, really talented offensive players, but too small to play in the NHL. There is a size requirement at this level. And I'm sorry, I don't think Bryson meets it, and it's questionable if Jones meets it. This was a very good way to kind of bring out some of the frustrations with the Sabres front office, and I hope that over the course of this series, we'll have a chance to air all of those grievances bit by bit. So that is all I have about Jacob Bryson and Zach Jones. Thank you for watching. It'll be interesting to see how this plays out. Do they keep 8? Do they keep 7? And it's Bryson, or 7 and it's Jones? That would shock me if it is Jones. But we'll see what happens. It's one of the things to follow in the preseason. So one of the things, I don't know if we're going to be excited about it, but it's one of the things we're going to follow closely. So thank you all for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like or a comment. Especially here, who do you think should be on the roster, Bryson or Jones? Or are you just tired that this is even a conversation at this point? Should they keep 8 D-men or should they keep 14 forwards? Please leave a comment. Let me know what you think. Thanks for watching. As always, go Sabres. Till next time, take care.